Thanks for tuning in to today's Tenant Thursdays video. Um, my name is Alex Escobedo. I am the Communication and Events Coordinator here at Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. Today we are going to discuss something very important, and we got brand new news today about it, but it's about the moratorium. And so we'll cover what it does, when it ends, and what tenants can do if the moratorium is not extended or when it stops being extended. With me today is a staff attorney here at LCBH. Morgan Schumann. She's also a manager at Renovention, an online free resource for Chicago renters facing housing issues. Thanks for being with us today, Morgan.
Thanks, Alex.
So I'm sure you've heard that the moratorium was extended today. But before we kind of even get into that, what is the moratorium? What has it changed from when it was first launched in March?
Sure. Yeah. So the eviction moratorium that's currently in place is in place because of executive orders that the governor of Illinois has put in place. And the nature of the executive orders that establishes this moratorium is that they have to be in kind of 30-day duration. So there has been a series of these executive orders that continue to be renewed every 30 days. And there have been some tweaks to the executive order since it first came out in March. But the gist of it is when the executive order first came out from the governor issuing this moratorium, it was a moratorium on enforcement of eviction actions, which meant that if a landlord had already gone to court and gotten an eviction order against a tenant, the sheriff was directed not to go out and actually enforce that eviction order by removing the tenant from the property. And that protection is still in place and has been renewed. The other aspect of it that came a little bit later, but that has also been renewed and is currently in place, is a moratorium on filing most eviction actions, which means that right now, most of the time, your landlord is not allowed to go into court and try to file an eviction case against you and get the ball rolling on that eviction quite yet. What it doesn't cover is it doesn't cover your landlord potentially giving an eviction notice. So maybe they would give you a 5-day notice or something if you have fallen behind on rent. They can still give those notices, but what the moratorium prohibits them from doing at the moment is taking that and actually filing an eviction case. There are a few limitations. So if the landlord is claiming that your tenancy is causing a severe risk to other people in the property or to the property itself, then there is a provision that can allow the landlord to go ahead and file without waiting until the end of the moratorium, but that's a pretty narrow exception.
Got it. And so I know with the CARES there were specific people covered. Is the moratorium covering every single Chicago renter, or is there certain people that are not covered by the moratorium?
The moratorium covers all renters for residential properties. So it's going to be different if you maybe are leasing a property that you use for your business or something like that. But if it's an apartment that you're renting, that you're living in, that type of a property, is going to be covered by this executive order setting the moratorium on eviction filings and on enforcement of residential evictions.
Right. And so the next question is about ending, right? And we knew that there was an end date to the current moratorium within this week. Do we know how it's going to look? Like, is it going to end and then a new type of moratorium going to start, or is it just going to be prolonged like another month per se?
It kind of remains to be seen. That's a really good question. And this is a question that we keep asking frequently throughout this pandemic is what's going to happen with the moratorium once the current order expires? Because like I said, each order only has a duration of 30 days. So the executive order that's in place right now is expiring on the 22nd. So I think that's Saturday, if my math is check my math before you rely on that, but it's coming up soon. And what we think is that the governor is potentially going to be doing another extension of the moratorium. And so that might be for 30 days. It might be for some shorter period of time. I can't say because that executive order hasn't been released yet, if it will be. And there's a chance that it won't be. As it stands right this moment, the executive order that's in place with the moratorium is set to expire on the 22nd. So that's all that we can guarantee. But I know that there's been conversations and that, there's a possibility that the governor is going to extend it. And extension is really important because if you are wondering about this eviction moratorium, it's probably because you've fallen behind on rent and you're worried about whether your landlord could evict you. And so right now there are rental assistance programs that are out there to help tenants to catch up on the rent. But those programs are at kind of the beginning stages and the application periods are open, but many tenants have not been able to actually secure rental assistance yet. And so if the eviction moratorium lapses and landlords are allowed to go ahead and begin to file cases against tenants in court, there's a chance that tenants could end up with an eviction on their record when, if there had just been a little bit more patience, maybe the tenant could have qualified and gotten rental assistance that could have covered it. So there's a real strong argument for why the eviction moratorium should be continued to help tenants actually get through that rental assistance process and hopefully be able to get some money or otherwise figure out, an alternative if they're able to find another job or otherwise stabilize their income so that you can potentially work out some sort of a deal and get caught up with the rent before your landlord can file anything.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for bringing up that rental assistance, Morgan. It looks like we did get a question, and someone is asking, what if your landlord does not accept rental assistance?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I would recommend is kind of a couple of fold. If you haven't already, if you're a tenant in the city of Chicago, you have a right to give your landlord a notice of COVID impact. And this is a notice, you can actually go onto rentervention.com and there's a little block at the top of the page that you'll see where you can click to generate a notice. And you can send this to your landlord and it basically tells them, look, landlord, I have been impacted by COVID and that's the reason why I've fallen behind on rent. And in Chicago, if you give your landlord that notice of COVID impact, anytime up until the expiration of a 5-day notice that your landlord might give you, it puts an obligation on the landlord to begin to negotiate with you in good faith, and they have to wait an extra 7 days before they're allowed to file an eviction case. So it can be a really good idea to give your landlord that notice of COVID impact. And then you might have, a pretty good argument that your landlord is not following the rules and not negotiating with you in good faith if they are denying, your application for rental assistance and not moving forward. But unfortunately, the paperwork and the process of it does require the landlord to go through the verification process. So at least through the IDA program, which is one of the main sources of rental assistance right now, and also through the CERA program, the court-based emergency rental assistance, both of those require the landlord's consent to participate. And so it's unlikely that you're going to be able to get that type of rental assistance without having your landlord's buy-in.
Definitely. Thank you for answering that, Morgan. It looks like we got another question, and that one is asking, what rent rights do tenants have if their building is set to be auctioned in September?
Oh, interesting. So if your building is set to be auctioned, you have the right to continue the lease that you've already had. So if it kind of depends, but if you are on let's say a year-long lease and it's continuing, just because the building ends up being sold either by auction or by private sale, your lease is going to carry over. There's also an ordinance, and I'm presuming that the person asking the question is within the city of Chicago, but there's a Keep Chicago Renting Ordinance called the KCRO, and that also gives additional rights to tenants that are tenants in a building going through a foreclosure. So if that applies to you, I would strongly recommend that you reach out to LCBH. We have a tenants in foreclosure hotline. I don't know the number by heart right now, but if you go onto Lawyers Committee for Better Housing's website, you'll be able to find it, and contact our foreclosure hotline, where we can get you some more specific information, because you do have protections as a renter in a building that's going through foreclosure.
Definitely, and I'd like to add, I will add that information that you just mentioned from the website, LCBH's website, into the chat box too, as a direct link. So if you are interested in that information, you have direct access to it. Thank you for answering. I know it was a little off topic from the moratorium, Morgan, but really appreciate it.
It's
Um,
important, yeah. And
mhm.
if you're watching and you have a question live, please jump in and ask your question. You know, that's what we're here for. So.
Definitely. And if you're watching it post live stream, or after we're done with the live stream, whether it's tomorrow or a week from now, definitely still ask a question. We're more than happy to monitor and let you know any information or resources, or point you in that direction. And it looks like they replied asking that it's a verbal lease, not a written lease, regarding the auction building.
Okay, still, you may still have some significant rights. So still go in and try to contact our office so that we can get you some specific information.
Right. So then, moving on to back to the moratorium. What does it mean when the moratorium is like ended and there's no longer any extension to it? What would that mean for a Chicago tenant?
Sure. So once the eviction moratorium lapses, then basically it goes back to how evictions have always been, which is that your landlord has to give you a notice of termination. So they have to tell you that your lease is ending. The notice will tell you how long it is that you might have to cure that violation. So if the issue is that you've fallen behind on rent, the most likely thing that you'll get is a 5-day notice. You might also see that you might get a 30-day notice for non-payment of rent. There were some federal protections that were in place from the CARES Act that required landlords in some buildings to provide their tenants with 30 days notice for non-payment cases instead of 5 days notice. So you might receive one of those two notices, and then you would have up until the end of that notice period to pay all of the back due rent. And if you're not able to pay all of that, then the landlord could go and actually file a case in court for an eviction. And so once they can file, we would anticipate that it's likely that the sheriff would begin serving tenants in those cases. So you would get notification that your landlord filed that case, and you would find out when the case was set for court. And then there's the court process that happens. And so you could choose to approach that in a couple different ways. If you find that yourself in eviction court, I strongly recommend that you try to consult with an attorney to learn more about your rights. But you would generally have a couple of options in terms of trying to work out a settlement agreement with the landlord to negotiate maybe a move out date. Potentially we could get your landlord to agree to waive some amount of the rent or something like that in exchange for a relatively quick move out. Or alternatively, maybe you can arrange a pay and stay agreement where you can get something in place that could allow you to maybe pay a little bit extra each month to catch up on the back due rent. Potentially, if you were able to get rental assistance, apply that rental assistance payment to lower the back due rent amount, and try to work out some sort of a plan that would enable you to stay in the apartment and have the landlord basically withdraw their case from the court. So that would be the options kind of generally once the case gets to court. But a couple things that you should know. If your landlord does file an eviction case against you, eviction cases can move very quickly through the court system, particularly if you don't get a lawyer and if there's no jury demand on file. So if you just show up on your first court date, the case is going to be set for trial on that date in front of a judge. And so knowing that you have a right to make a jury demand is something that's important, because it can help to move the case over. It can allow you to have time to issue discovery and ask questions and all of that stuff. It can really buy you the time to negotiate a smooth resolution to your case. So that's really important to know. But if you're facing eviction and your landlord actually files something, contact an attorney so that we can really go through the specifics of your case and work through kind of what options you have and what might be the best case scenario. But the goal, though, is to avoid that eviction filing. The goal is to try to figure out what you can do to prevent your landlord from taking that step and going to court, because that's not fun for anybody. It's it shows up right away on your public record. If somebody were to search your name, if there's an eviction filing against you, that's going to come up. So in order to really preserve your ability to find housing in the future, it's best to try to work out some sort of plan now. So if you're worried that you're falling behind on rent, figure out what your options are. Do whatever you can to try to increase your income if that's an option. Explore rental assistance to find out if you can qualify for that. Have open conversations with your landlord about where you're at and what you can pay. If anything, if you get a 5-day notice and you can't cure it in full, but you could make some sort of a payment toward it, can be a good idea to potentially make that payment, but only in the context of an agreement where your landlord says in writing that they are withdrawing the 5-day notice that they gave you and agreeing to a payment plan. And that they will not file a case as long as you're complying with your agreement. So all of these things are complex. And if you are at all worried about this, please go to rentervention.com. You can give some information about your detail, about your circumstance. We can potentially be able to connect you with a volunteer attorney that could help explain how all of these things and pieces fit together in your context. And if you don't go through intervention, try to talk to another attorney or really research your options so that you know what to expect, either in this pre-eviction stage or if the moratorium lifts and your landlord files a case, that you can really understand what's going to happen from there.
And I do want to say both the rentervention.com link is already in the comment section. And if you're wondering about rental assistance, I know we touched up on that a little bit. There's also the link to the IDA emergency rental assistance in the comment section as well. So you'd have those resources just by kind of scrolling down. And like she said, as Morgan said, please go to Rentervention if you need any emergency or any immediate concerns. And if you're watching this post live stream, again, please comment, let us know if you have any questions regarding the moratorium. Do monitor. I will be posting on social media any new updates regarding the moratorium and the extension if there's one. Looks like those were all the questions that I had received prior to our live stream right now, Morgan. So if you're watching live and you have any questions that haven't been answered or addressed, please put them in there now. If you're watching offline and after the live stream, again, please go ahead and put them on. I monitor the comment section on all these videos every day. But I do want to thank you for your time and answering all these questions that we had today, Morgan.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And if I can just reinforce one point, if you think you might qualify for rental assistance, please move quickly. I know, I believe the city of Chicago's application period is closing as of the 24th. And the IDA program that we were talking about, that application has to be submitted by the 28th. So please also double check me on those dates, but I know that's coming up. And also, if you're planning on applying for rental assistance, have a conversation with your landlord about it so that they know to be expecting communication from IDA or from whatever other rental assistance you go through, so that they are on the lookout for that and they're responsive. If you are not sure if you qualify for IDA and you want to do a quick little checklist to see if you might fit the eligibility criteria, we also have a nifty tool that's on rentervention.com. There's two things right at the top of the page. One of them is that notice of COVID impact that I talked about. And then the other one is an eligibility checker for the IDA rental assistance. So if you want to see if you might qualify based on your circumstance, you can go through that process. I will let you know that one of the main hiccups for people is that the IDA program requires you to have a current lease. So if you are a month-to-month tenant, you might want to actually reach out to your landlord to see whether they're willing to enter into a lease agreement with you, so that you would have that document that you could provide through the rental assistance process. So just be aware of that. But Rentervention can even generate a lease for you. So it's really set up that if you head over there, hopefully you should be able to walk through kind of these options. But please act quickly on it, because these programs are not going to be around for long.
And I did just add that link to the eligibility checker onto the chat as well. So you can go ahead and just click it. I believe it should be the last link I posted. So if you're interested and you're not sure if you're eligible, go ahead and click there and then go through that flow to find out. It looks like we haven't received any new questions, Morgan. So I do want to thank you for your time. And once a reminder, one more time, if you're watching this offline and you have any questions, please put them on there. I will provide answers and get back to you offline and after the live stream.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Definitely. Thank you. And one last reminder, if you are watching, we will be going, we do Tenant Thursdays every Thursday at 6 p.m. So stay tuned. I will be posting updates on next week's segment. So see you next week.
Can I, before you close the live stream, Alex, I should have mentioned this earlier, and I think I've implied it several times by telling you to contact an attorney if you're worried about this. But I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. So I don't know the specifics of your particular case. Please take everything I said as legal information that can help you understand what the process looks like right now, but don't take it as legal advice specific to your context. Please talk to an attorney. I can't give legal advice over Facebook Live. So please talk to an attorney about your particular circumstance. And thanks for letting me get that disclaimer out.
Definitely. No worries.
Thanks,
well, definitely. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.